culture and heritage. Two terminologies intertwined and interlinked with each other. Today we will have the pleasure to discuss about the United Nations UNESCO, about its program, its objectives, and its mission. We have the pleasure to have with us Professor Stavros Katsios from the Ionian University, who's also the UNESCO Chair on Threats on Cultural Heritage. My name is Dr. Marios Eftimiopoulos, and I'm the CEO of Strategy International. And this is Prime Analysis. Professor Stavros Katsios, thank you very much for being with us at this show, and thank you for the time that you have provided to us. Allow me to go straight to the point, if I may. What is cultural heritage?
Thank you for having me, Marios. Cultural heritage is a term that is widely spread and used in everyday life. It is the term that is being used for a reference to the past, despite the fact that it is a central tool for creating the future. So cultural heritage is seen through a lens of globality and of prime importance. So that explains also the role of the United Nations in the whole process.
I mean, you have the experience from around the world, and it's of no coincidence that you're the chairholder of the UNESCO Chair on the threats to cultural heritage. So can you please explain me more about the mission, the objective of being a chair of UNESCO on the threats to cultural heritage?
Well, we are part of the whole network of university chairs of UNESCO. That is approximately about today, it must be about 800 chairs around the world. Our chair is a rather unique chair because it is an umbrella chair. It has a general focus on threats to cultural heritage and nothing specific. That means that we are aiming at identifying new forms of threats and risks that endanger cultures and cultural heritage of people, as well as their cultural heritage-related activities such as tourism, for example, and not only. Well, the chair focuses on the study, analysis, research, and policy making. It supports policy making activities according to the statute of UNESCO for the university chairs.
That's very interesting to say. And allow me to say, how does this interlink between university and the United Nations? The United Nations, for those that do not know, is the world international organization that connects basically every international and regional organization, and it's a single entity that has created UNESCO. So how does this connect between academia and the United Nations?
Well, the UNESCO has conceived from its early stages that as it is primarily involved in preserving culture and primarily culture of peace. I mean,
True.
Culture of peace. If in order to establish such a culture of peace, you need education, and if you need education, you must go through the channels of education. And I don't think that it is. They are using also every stage of educational of the educational system, but at the end of the chain are the universities, and the UNESCO chairs are the units that are primarily involved in studying and analyzing and in lifelong learning.
Let me just go a bit
Sorry.
into more terminologies, if I may. Threats to cultural heritage. And I'm mixing this with current events around the world. Unfortunately, we live in a period where there are a lot of wars around. We've seen the destruction of cultural heritage being done lately within 2012 onwards in Syria, with the rise of ISIS destroying, if you want, the locality and the region that they were controlling for a bit of period of time, but they have done a huge damage. Prior damage has been done in Iraq, similarly, and so on. The story goes on, if I may. Within where war situations exist of whatever kind, we see the threats to culture, to heritage, to the mixture of both terminologies and applications, but also the destruction of history. How do you combine your efforts with regards not only to the protection, but to making sure that all governments comprehend the importance of retaining cultural heritage and retaining history?
Well, Marius, there are a lot of types of threats and actually emergencies, because we are operationally, we are referring to the Directorate of the Emergencies in the UNESCO, because UNESCO has a directorate, a newly established Director of Emergencies, and we are referring to a lot of types of emergencies. For example, I mean, not only you have rightly mentioned the conflict
Sure.
cases. And these are actually the most, let's say, commercialized emergencies in terms that it has a lot of drama around it, and it's easily to communicate it through the international press. But we have also emergencies that are related to climate change, to natural disasters, to civil disorder, to illicit trafficking,
Of course.
a very big.
And anti-fraudulent activities, financial, I presume, also.
Yes, most of them have an economic character. All the threats, I mean, all the threats and most of the criminal acts have a criminal background, at least background.
So it's a
And
multidisciplinary approach.
also health emergencies like COVID,
Sure.
because this is also threatening,
Yeah, the health,
and it has
health.
damaged
Yes.
cultural heritage,
Yeah, of course.
surely. Fires, etc., etc. So we have a big palette of emergencies, of threats that we have to deal with. So we are trying to perform accordingly, in terms that we are trying to choose the right tools which can apply to most of them.
That's very interesting. Can I go on several cases, which are all of those cases of emergency crisis are important, but I presume one of the things that people may not understand is that in the after-war situations, we see a lot of fraudulent activities and a lot of movement with regards to heritage artifacts. In fact, Greece has been asking for its artifacts back, not only about on Athens but also other heritage and historical artifacts that have been lost or stolen, for that matter. How do we track them down? What is the plan? How do we prepare the process, the perspectives, the whole operation in order to define what has been lost, in order to define the process that we need to follow with regards to pointing out and pinpointing those lost artifacts, and to bring them back?
Well, yes, it is, as you said, of great importance. This lost and found chase we have to do in these cases. Actually, we have established, because of this, of the importance, we have established also a working group specialized in illicit trafficking of antiquities, but not only of antiquities, also of modern art, which is headed also by a very well-known professional forensic archaeologist, which is Dr. Christos Tsirogiannis, and we are working systematically towards with I would say limited but noteworthy success. A lot of these antiquities or treasures have been either registered in archives or have been found out by archaeological excavations. We are working with photos primarily and with archives which are put together by the archaeologists themselves. And because they are taking photos every time they find something of the object. And we are most of our successes have been registered in the framework of the modern auction industry. I'm referring to auction houses like esteemed auction houses like Christie's, Sotheby's, etc., who sometimes either willingly or not willingly choose to trade this kind of artifacts, and in order to auction them, they also publish their photos. So we are comparing the photos of the excavations, for example, with the photos of the auction houses. And in that way, we are finding out, if possible, the objects which are illegally obtained.
Okay. I mean, there are a lot of questions that I would like to ask, but I will go one by one. Considering the private sector in collaboration with UNESCO, so there is a collaboration. Probably they do communicate with you to give information that we're going to sell this, make sure that this is legal. This is what I understood from what you just said.
Yes, there are. Sometimes there are. Sometimes there are post-mortem calls.
Really?
After we have already been engaged and found out about the whereabouts of the artifacts to be auctioned. But nevertheless, it has also to do with the necessity of one of our, for example, one of our ways to engage in these emergencies. That is, we have to not only to chase after the artifacts, but we have also to engage ourselves in public information and awareness. Because if people, if even clients, even collectors are fully informed, I think that the danger of of fostering illicit trafficking is always going to be less and less. And that needs an access, a dialogue, and a learning system.
Can I say something else? In some governments, in some countries, there is a dignified agency that actually deals with illicit trafficking and artifacts. Once they come in the country, they track them down, they find them, and they stop them. In the European Union sector, and let us say in Greece and Cyprus, does this authority exist?
Of course, I mean it exists. It exists. The police has a directorate. The Greek and Cypriot police has such a directorate. The ministries of culture have an agency for these things. But okay, I mean these are they work together with international organizations most of the time,
Europol,
like
Interpol,
for example, or I don't know which other policing organization there is. And I think that we have, okay, the successes are important and not very worth mentioning. But what we are doing, we are actually going forward before, I mean, we are a step before them in the sense that we have a lot of archives. And Dr. Tsirogiannis is authority, as being an authority in this field, has also a great experience in these kind of things. And sometimes they're also coming to us and ask
And get
for
information.
support and help. And that is very good because
Absolutely.
that's what we are doing. And we are here to help and to make the process of preserving cultural heritage much more efficient. I mean, this is also a capacity building function in terms that this kind of support is not only limited to countries like Cyprus and Greece, which are European Union members, and they are developed countries for God's sake. A lot of African states have this kind of problem. A lot of Asian countries have this kind of problem. They don't have the capacities like Cyprus
And when the
and
capacity is not
Greece
there, the United
or
Nations
Italy,
is
for
there.
example,
And when the
talking
capacity,
about the
yeah.
Mediterranean.
I mean, the
Yeah.
reason why I asked is because I wanted to emphasize on the fact that Greece and Cyprus, which are some of the oldest European countries, if not globally, they share a percentage of, of the global heritage. So it's only normal, like Italy, for example, to have such organizations in place. The reason behind it is because a lot of times we ordinary people may not understand the work that is done on the back, and it is extremely important to raise these standards and these bars. And you also mentioned something very important, is that a lot of countries may not have the financial capability or capacity or even the structural capacity given in order to protect this cultural heritage of their own respective country, whether this is in Africa or whether this is in Latin America or whether this is in Asia. So that's where the United Nations awfully gets, and I presume also you get to travel a lot in order to be able to see yourself these things. So allow me to add something here, because our audience is diverse, so they're also looking on these aspects. What about students? What about new coming students, new researchers and scientists? How do they contribute, or how can they contribute towards the work of UNESCO Chair or UNESCO itself?
Well, our students are actually the most important wheel of the machinery because all this anticipation and all this work to research work in order not only to find out about illicit trafficking, but to foresee certain developments
Exactly.
before happening. Needs field research, needs field work. It needs a comparison of hundreds of photos and data, which nobody else can do it except our students, which
Hmm.
are students not only doctoral students, not only postdoctoral students, but we have engaged. We have an approach of engaging also graduate students in our work, and with excellent results till now. And I can tell you that we have been one of the unique cases of an UNESCO chair that uses regularly a considerable group of students for its everyday duties.
And it's very important as well because you just mentioned the interdisciplinary approach. So You need basically researchers from all fields. And while these are explored, you need also to enhance, I presume, all this information with regards to policy establishment and events. And it's of no coincidence that we at Strategy International are looking very forward-looking in terms of that forecasting and risk analysis with regards to UNESCO. And we have an agreement of collaboration between us. But more importantly, it is also to make the private sector understand exactly what is this perspective and why is it important to protect historical heritage, to protect our culture, to protect the dimensions, the different historical dimensions of our civilizations. Because you mentioned in your earlier discussion, you mentioned also that it's not only archaeology, is not only antiquity, it is modern, it is postmodern. All these things matter from the moment they are defined as a cultural aspect, as a cultural artifact. Then we need to actually preserve and protect it. So the question that actually comes to my mind is, how do we define what is an artifact that can be defined as a cultural heritage artifact? What are the standards that we need to complete or fulfill that something is designated as a cultural heritage?
Everything that is being created till the minute it has recently passed, for example, 2 minutes before, is considered to be a cultural heritage. I mean, every minute it passes, cultural heritage involves. Now we are talking. Cultural heritage has been developed and created
So it starts
somewhere in the world.
So it starts with history, basically, creating history.
It starts with human creativity and human need to express, for expression. And the critical point is that cultural heritage comes from civilizations, from great civilizations, or civilization, because all civilizations have their greatness. But it belongs to a very diverse field of countries. I mean, as we know, Greek heritage, ancient Greek heritage, for example, is being found everywhere in the Mediterranean, in Turkey, in
Middle East, North Africa, all
North
around
Africa.
Black
I mean,
Sea,
and
Sea of Azov, and goes on.
here comes a problem, actually, that we must not identify cultural heritage with national politics, because a lot of if we are finding, for example, some antiquities which have been illicit traded, and we find out that they come from Troy, for example, or from Ephesus, then succeeding in getting them back, we are giving them to Turkey, because this is the country from which
controls the area.
artifacts are coming.
Yeah, I mean, in a modern state of affairs, I understand the nationhood and the control of the land versus the cultural heritage. And correctly put, you put it in a very sound element that cultural heritage is global. But what comes as a state of political mind in this case is that when you know that there is a civilization that has provided a global heritage in a large periphery, if you translate this in politics, the number one element is you respect the country where it does come from, which is really important to stress. Now, with the fact, for example, that Ephesus is in Turkey, in fact, one of the things that is commonly known from archaeologists is you like to protect this heritage by keeping this heritage in the local area where it was created. So it's only normal that your request to the government, who actually is in control of the land because of historical, political reasons over the centuries, over the years, it has a control of the land, then it has as its duty to protect. So the question is, do all countries have signed on UNESCO's objectives and missions, which is also the protection of cultural heritage and fighting illicit trade or fraudulent activities of illicit trade on cultural heritage, artifacts, and anything else that is considered of cultural heritage.
Let me mention forefront that we are talking about tangible now, tangible heritage, because there is also the protection of intangible heritage.
Okay.
And if I may just note something, that the beginning of protecting tangible heritage is to protect the intangible heritage, because intangible heritage is the narrative. And if the narrative goes away, blown away, then the owner of the culture, of the tangible cultural heritage, is a question mark. It's always a question mark in politics, for example.
Can you?
I mean, the first thing.
No, please go ahead.
The first thing someone does in order to question the cultural heritage of someone else, for example, is to question the intangible part first of the story, the narrative, and then goes the operation goes to the tangible. And all this politics around who is who, and for example, this Macedonian question we have been having for so many years in Greece with the former Yugoslav Republic in Skopje, it had to do with intangible heritage primarily. I mean, with the story, with the narrative. So your question is very to the point, because UNESCO is a unique organization. It has almost 100% success in membership. And there is a series of conventions that UNESCO uses, and we use as their toolkit for protecting cultural heritage. The oldest is the Hague Convention of 1954 for the protection of cultural property, and having one in 1970, 1972, 2001, 2003, there is let's say a regulatory toolkit that gives the protection of cultural heritage a sufficient, I would say, arsenal to go on with the work. The problem is the political will most of the times, as you know, in Strategy International, that regarding of toolkits or of legal frameworks, in a lot of cases, politics do influence negatively the process.
I mean, of course. I mean, the legal aspect is only normal that is established, because you have to put the rules and the norms, as well as the objectives and the missions into this. And as you correctly put in the end, I was thinking while you were talking, how do you balance the political affairs with regards to how you present one? I mean, there are obviously a lot of advertisements that you might see around the world, where you see an advertisement of a land, which is correctly to put that this is a land that is controlled by X country, but in fact, that narrative, that history, doesn't belong to this X country, but it belongs to the Y country. So although historians and archaeologues would really put it on the advertisement within the actual place that you would go and visit, somehow, somewhere, the marketing scheme that comes along projects and protects more the national place where you are, instead of that multiculturalism, if I may call it as such, the diversity of the people that have passed through. And in fact, in Cyprus, which really matters, as well as Greece, I presume, but more into Cyprus, because Cyprus is located in the southeast Med. So, as you can understand, a lot of civilizations have passed through, whether this is from east to west or west to east, north to south, and goes on. And you can understand the complexities that has come about. One of the good exit strategies in a good way with regards to UNESCO's protection, engagement, more application may have to do so with the fact that it's a multicultural state in many aspects. So from the beginning of archaeology until today, you see a lot of other civilizations being involved. And in fact, if you go all around Cyprus, you'll see a lot of dimensions of different historical and political values, including also religious values, including also cultural values. And this is, as you said, is really important to make sure that we understand the narrative of that above the nationhood of a state, that this is global heritage. And I'm adding here the word of global heritage because this is global history. This is where we're coming from. This may be untangible, but it is what untangible makes tangible aspects of the things that we're considering today. Can I just add to this the element of religious culture? How do we anticipate? How do we define tolerance and coexistence, cultural and religious coexistence in an age where things are secure, insecure, volatility is high, accusations may be quite easygoing in terms of political affairs, but then again, we need to protect, if you want, also the religious heritage. Do you also deal with religious heritage from history to contemporary aspects?
Well, we deal with cultural heritage, which includes religious heritage. For example, we have done some work on the issue of Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, today's Istanbul. So I think that we are not making any special exception on religious heritage, in terms that we don't want to give the chance to politicians who are going to, let's say, manipulate this kind of operations. For us, religious heritage, cultural heritage, is part of the cultural heritage as we are talking. And of course, it is, you have pointed out, I mean, it is a tricky field because it is easily to be manipulated, and people are very sensitive in this kind of things. Nevertheless, we are trying to operate in a pure, let's say, technocratic spirit. And I think that we are achieving that. And of course, it's not all over the world. Religion is and religious artifacts and heritage is being viewed very differently. I mean, it's very different what we are talking about in the discussion, the debate between, for example, Christians and Muslims, and it's very different when the Japanese are talking about religious artifacts or the Chinese. I think that
is it? Can I say?
when we're talking about,
can I say something?
yes.
Is it different, or is it on purpose different?
No, it is different. And it's different in terms of personalizing the debate. Cultural heritage, religious cultural heritage, for example, in Far East, and I'm referring because we had such discussions with the Chinese and Japanese for a certain period. I mean, they're viewing religion and as such the religious heritage very differently as from us, the Caucasians, for example, or from us, the Christians or the Muslims, because they are much more flexible in this thing. I don't say that it is better or worse, but it's different. And for example, a typical Japanese views cultural heritage. Cultural heritage. It's nature. That's nature for the Taoist. But the same Taoist Japanese citizen is, when you ask him, he answers that he's also a bit Buddhist. I mean, imagine
So they see this
that
as a natural habitat,
a
basically.
Muslim says, I'm Muslim, but also I'm a bit Christian. I mean, it's a bit odd. It will be a bit odd.
What about
But
the
they
Chinese?
mean it. They
What
mean it
about
because
the Chinese?
the Chinese are no, Chinese are not influenced by Taoism. The Japanese are influenced also from Buddhism. I mean, they have two main religions there. So, but the explanation is obvious. In the Far East, there has never been a religious war historically. You can search the books, you can search everything. In Far East, there has never been a religious war. Is that a coincidence? No,
Yeah, but
it's not a
the
coincidence.
argument, somebody, when if we go deeper into religious affairs, um, the monotheistic faiths, if we can put it like this, and there is an interreligious dialogue that takes place all around the world. Even here in Cyprus, you see everyone coming here while they also go to Greece, they also go to Italy, they also go to the Holy Land. So you see, you anticipate this element, and they're very interlinked and at the same time very competitive in a way that is when it's defined in terms of politics. But in a natural habitat of religions, I am of personal belief that all religions are talking about peace, the basic element and objective of the United Nations, not only UNESCO but the United Nations. But it has been so that our faiths are interlinked with our nationhoods in many aspects and sequences, sometimes more, sometimes less. And in fact, in Asia, it may be different, but China, as an example, has been making quite different policies vis-a-vis cultural heritage. If they want to call religious a cultural heritage, then they have caused a lot of damage, considering a lot of issues that have been raised lately with regard to how China envisions this. You've seen destructions of many places of worship without stating one or another. There are many places. And at the same time, they're opening other places of worship. So, yes, the understanding and the cultural understanding may be different. And as you correctly put, the Japanese may be different. The Koreans may also be different. The Indonesians are also different as a Muslim state. And it goes on and on. Nepalese with the Buddhists. They may also be different, but every now and then, the idea is that religions are a part of cultural heritage, and as such, it needs to be protected somehow in a position of coexistence, support, and at the same time, the freedom of a religious expression within the legal norms of a country that has its own religion as it comes through. Um, and in fact, you are correct to say that in Europe, in North Africa, in the Caucasus, in Central Asia, all these things may be a bit different because there is always a fight for religious political domination. In fact, there are a lot of political and religious analysis on religious affairs that actually nominate that there is somehow an extreme level of utilization of several religions. In the history books, you've seen other means and implementations of being used throughout these areas to conquer other lands. So, how do you split, let's say, in modern affairs, in UNESCO's policies? How do you avoid mixing the probability of bringing a discussion on cultural heritage and religion that, when defined in a deeper sense, it may cause some sort of unbalance with regards to the mission and the objectives of the UN of UNESCO, basically to protect any kind of cultural heritage. How do you bring about this
Well, I
balance?
mean,
That's my question.
yeah, we don't try that, and the reasons are for us at least are rather obvious because we know that every discussion about cultural heritage, regardless if it, I mean, okay, regardless if it is intangible or tangible, brings with it, let's say, a sense feelings. It brings feelings, okay. And it brings, sometimes it has to do with national whereabouts. We are above these things. We are trying. We are really above these things because we are deeply devoted in one principle. And this principle came, it's not a dogmatic principle, it's a principle that came after certain debates among the members of the chair and among some people in UNESCO. And that is that cultural heritage as we view it today is very different as compared to cultural heritage as the next generation will view it. And we are viewing cultural heritage also very different compared to the previous generations. So in order to be the protectors we wish to be, we must think out of the box and think how things may evolve or develop in the next 2 or 3 decades, and not be so selfish and just act according to our criteria. So I think that talking about cultural heritage is talking about identities, and identity has also the nation or the national identity part in it. That's not bad. I think that we must start looking at these things rather positive, rather as maybe as the solution to the problems and not the problem itself. Because there are people who not only appreciate the culture of the other, but they live by it. I mean, tourism in its, let's say, primer stage was and is an expression of love to the culture and cultural heritage of the other. And I think that talking about with museum conservators, with archaeologists, with other professionals in that field, I think that there is space and there is hope that our cultural heritage policies may involve to be the generator of a new approach to international relations.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking now, and I was thinking, how important is the aspect of culture and civilization within the discussion, what we call at Strategy International the discussion of civilizations. Because in our think tank, the idea is that we bring forward the discussion of civilizations in a variety of aspects, in making sure and somehow bringing on board a central pillar, which is most important for the humankind in its totality. We live in an age with a lot of changes, a lot of new alliances and new balances. There are new threats, challenges, which are not going to stop. And as you correctly put in the beginning, it is not only political, it's also environmental, man-made or non-man-made, climate changes, but also somehow the preservation of our history, of our global history, because a national history of a land may also be a global history of a land. And as you know better than I, a religious aspect cannot only be solidified with one country or one nation, but it can be also expanded elsewhere in other countries. So all this contributes to the dialogue of civilizations that we also hope that will put a lot of emphasis, if you want, within the discussion that you're already doing with the UNESCO Chair. And I really thank you for giving us the time, Professor Katsios, in explaining those elements, because they're very important for all of them, for all our audience, but also for me as well, to comprehend more your very important work and scientific and academic work, but also professional work. So thank you very much for being with us together, Professor. And I really hope to have you in person next time.
Thank you, Marius. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you all for watching the web series of Strategy International. Please subscribe, like, and follow our YouTube channel and social media platforms. My name is Dr. Mario Eftimiopoulos, and I'm the CEO of Strategy International, and I'm the host of Prime Analysis. And remember, impact makes a difference.